deplete the relief well and try to shut the well down that way. And that's essentially what the administration is saying, which is let's figure out what the possible risks are before we go through with this test, and possibly could lead to more damage that would be much harder to deal with. Chris?
Okay, thank you so much for your report, NBC's Mara Schiavocampo. John Hofmeister was president of Shell Oil. He's author of Why We Hate the Oil Companies. Thank you so much for joining us again, John. You just heard that assessment. What's your view, knowing what you just heard?
Well, I think the fundamental issue, to cut through the coded language, Chris, is there are serious concerns about the integrity of the casing that is the well itself. And that by putting the cap on and doing the stress tests that were being talked about, that the integrity of the steel is insufficient to hold the pressure of the well. And if you lose the casing, it's game over. It's like having a volcano on the bottom of the sea, where you have if you lose the casing and oil starts coming up on the outside of the casing, you can't stop it. There's nothing you can do that would then stop it other than implode the well. And so I think it's prudent, under the conditions that are there, and there are many in the industry feel that the casing must have been damaged because of the power of that well, the pressure of that reservoir. And so let's kind of not go to the stress tests until we're ready to go with the relief wells, because the relief well, building up a column of heavy mud, could be the best case to shut down the flow.
Now, as I understand it, John, correct me where I'm wrong here, the goal was to gradually close this cap so that you're like tightening the funnel so it gets stronger and stronger pressure in the middle, and decide at some point whether that strong pressure coming there is an indication that the well is sound, that there is integrity in the well. I thought that was the plan. What's the risk of gradually letting that pressure come into a narrower and more narrow funnel coming out of there to test its strength and then see whether you can go all the way? And what will they know in a couple of days they don't know now?
Well, if you were at 200 feet or 400 feet, it's one thing. You're at 5,000 feet. You don't really know the integrity of that casing throughout the 13,000 feet depth of the well. There could be damage anywhere along the 13,000 foot, and once you stop blocking the oil, you start clamping down on the flow at what might be 30,000 pounds per square inch of pressure. You don't know where that might blow. And I think you'd better be in position to have those relief wells ready to go, or actually up and operating, before you try to control the flow from the start. I think that's the debate that has to take place.
Right. Do you have a sense that the United States government, under the leadership of Secretary Chu at Energy and Thad Allen, who's now an independent consultant, I guess, the administration out of the Coast Guard, that they have any superior knowledge as to the technology over BP? Because this seems to be the first time in this long saga where the federal government is trumping, or apparently ready to trump, BP on the issue of technological knowledge.
I think the federal government has reached out to its own experts, Chris. I think that Secretary Chu is a brilliant Nobel laureate, but he's never drilled a well. He can hear what others have to say, but he has no first-hand experience. So it's my understanding that they have brought in some of their own expertise that's really talking just to the government, not to BP. Okay. And it is through those sources that they're getting an additional point of view that raises serious questions. There are people out there that have worked with high-pressure reservoirs, have had blowouts, have had to deal with the issues. Those people are independent of BP. So while BP has great technical capability, don't you really want, if you're the government, to have a third-party point of view? And I think that's what's surfacing now.
Do you have any opinion on this story that's breaking? A number of New York-based senators and New Jersey senators are acting now they want an investigation by the Senate Foreign Relations Committee as to whether BP, the company involved in this catastrophe, had a hand in lobbying the British government to release that man involved with the Lockerbie horror. Do you know anything about that?
Well, I know the story generally, but I have no knowledge or insight into whether BP did or did not have dealings. I do know that just as our State Department advances the commercial interests of American companies around the world, the counterpart, and it was Jack Straw at the time, the foreign minister of the UK, does look out for the commercial interests of UK companies. To the extent BP was involved, I have no knowledge.
What about the New York Times front page story just yesterday that basically chronicled the history of BP in terms of its not being a good player? Your assessment, how does BP stack up against the other petroleum companies in terms of safety?
I think the reputation that would be probably warranted given the facts is that BP was not well renowned for its technical savvy, that there were other companies that had a better reputation both for the technical savvy and the operational integrity of how they went about their operations. That's not to say BP is a laggard or a slacker, but it's just to say that within the industry there were people that were sort of ranked in order, and you'd always pretty much rank Exxon at the top, then Shell, then Chevron, Conoco, and so forth. BP would be somewhere down the list.
Well, thank you very much, John Hofmeister. As always, it's great to have you on the show. Bottom line question, do you have any optimism about this mess in the Gulf? Do you think we're going to actually deal with this effectively sometime in August in terms of that relief well? Do you think it's going to work, this ultimate technology?
I think the relief well is the best shot for now, but I think there should be a backup plan which says what would we need to do to just produce the well. Take all the proceeds from producing the well and use that money selling that oil to restore the Gulf of Mexico. Don't let anybody make a dime of profit off it. Just restore the Gulf of Mexico by producing the well and making that turn into money which can satisfy some of the issues of nature, wetlands restoration, etc.
So use the relief well for money. Raise the money, bring the oil out, make the money, and use it to pay off the people who have been hurt by this.
No, first try to shut off the flow with the relief well. If that doesn't work, then produce the well.
Okay, thank you very much. John Hofmeister, our expert here on Hardball on this whole catastrophe. Yesterday, I said the Republican Party has welcomed all sorts of yahoos. Up next, Republican Congressman Bob Inglis